being taught very well anymore, okay? So if you do want to reference it, it is from your level 2 as well as the level 3 handbook, and those are the old handbooks, okay? We have to take them around if you want to reference them at all, okay? Some of the main things we're going to go over today are character traits, qualities of leadership, and then the principles of leadership, and there's 10 of those, okay? This is one of those classes that is fundamentally important for you as a leader to be able to develop and understand how to properly lead your cadets and how you're going to be able to engage your subordinates, okay? Obviously, this is one of those classes that you as senior NCOs will be utilizing every time, this information, every time you're cadets. This is going to be something that you'll have to use, okay? Something that should be in the back of your head at all times when you're dealing with your subordinates and your cadets, okay? So just before we get into the lesson itself, a couple of things. First off, when I'm talking, you're not. If you have a question, put up your hand, and if everybody else is talking as well, please respect their opinions. Okay, so it's gonna be sort of open discussion a little bit today. Okay, so at the end of my class, we're gonna have a little bit of an open discussion for you guys as well. So make sure you take some notes because you're gonna have to think about what I'm teaching you today at the end of my class. Okay, and then kind of speak on behalf of that. So any questions before we begin? Okay, so just before I start teaching you guys, I want you guys to think about what is happening in the squadron that you think are good examples of leadership and what are bad examples, okay? So if you have something off the top of your head, you can put up your hand. If not, think about it for a second. And I want us to kind of think about our squadron for a second and see what you think of as something that we've noticed is good, something that's not going too well right now. Is there anything we can think of?
For bad thing, the flight corporals, the junior cadet, they're not taking initiatives. They're technically fooling around with the beginners, the ACs and the LACs. So then technically they're not showing that how they're better than them. So then, if in the future if they become senior cadets, they might, there's no leadership in them.
Okay, so professionalism is one big thing as well that you're mentioning here, right? So yeah, that's something that we've noticed. So, you know, as a senior CO, as a corporal, even as a flight corporal, as you progress from each stage, then you should be separating yourself from younger cadets, right? And that's something that hasn't been noticed as much. And that's something that needs to be implemented back as well as with the corporals and the flight corporals, right? So what are some things that we're doing pretty well so far that you can think of? Yeah.
Just in terms of communication, more like one-on-one as opposed to overall. But I find like when we're talking to cadets or above ourselves, when you're having a conversation that you're really focused in on and not thinking about other things or distracted, I find like we're really starting to pay attention more, like if a cadet has a problem or if we need to pass something up. So sometimes we need a little bit more of that for effective communication, and sometimes we do it really well.
Okay, so that falls into the category of like care for subordinates, right? So getting one-on-one and talking to people, seeing what they're thinking, how they're doing, that kind of stuff, okay? So good, so that's something that we are starting to do, but there's always more room for progression there, right? So, perfect. Okay, so we're gonna go into character traits. Now, before we get into that too much, what I want you to do is think of somebody influential that you've had, you know, a role model in cadets, role model in general in your life, and picture that person and the qualities that they possess. Okay, some of the quality traits, some of the character traits, what you admired in them, and how you felt when you were around them, okay? Does everyone have someone in mind? Okay, now think of it this way. Consider yourself being that person. You are someone that younger cadets are looking up to, okay? Character traits are one of the most important things in a leader, okay? Because believe it or not, there's going to be cadets that are looking up to you guys, just the way that you were looking up to the person that you just thought of, okay? So if you think that somebody in your past or right now has good qualities, good character traits that you admire, well then there's going to be cadets that are feeling the same way towards you, okay? So when you are thinking about that, then that also makes you wonder more about how your actions affect others, okay? So every cadet has someone that they want to be like, okay, so a role model. So it's important to understand your character traits so that you can sort of administer that a little bit more. If you recognize that there's somebody who has chosen you as a role model, then you want to help mentor them, okay? And this is where the character traits come into play a little bit more. Alright, so there are 4 primary character traits, and the first of which is integrity, okay? Integrity is hard thing to define. There's sort of a lot of components that go into being having a lot of integrity as a person, and in my opinion, it's one of the most important qualities because it sort of evolves around several other qualities as well, kind of integrates them. And it can be broken down to three main components as I've sort of defined here. So one of the first things that sort of incorporates integrity is respect for one's word, okay? So what do you think would that mean there, starting this year? Respect for one's word, what do you...
Like if somebody said that this is how it should go, you should like respect it and follow through with that specific order.
Okay, so yeah, sort of along the same line, okay? So it's your word. When you tell a cadet to do something, the subordinate cadets will cherish that, okay? It's something that they just find is going to be extremely important. So your word is basically sacred to them, okay? It's something very important, something very special. And if you ask the cadet to do something, as long as you still have their respect and as long as they respect you, then it's going to be something they're going to follow, okay? So integrity sort of takes that into account, okay? So you respect or you demonstrate respect for one's word. And same thing will sort of go with cadets. They'll respect your word and they'll think that whatever you say is going to be critical and important, okay? Respect for others' property. So, you know, if you notice that cadets are leaving stuff around, don't just take it and dump it somewhere, okay? Who can give me a recent example that we've been pushing for the last few weeks about cadets' property and it being left behind and how you should respect it? Morris Charles announced some break the other day.
Having cadets leave it and level 2 class them upstairs.
Right, so I have respect and the officers have respect for my cadets' properties, right? What we issue them is important to us because it helps their learning, it administers their learning, and it's something that they need to be able to you know, have a better time here at cadets. So we don't want them leaving it outside anymore. Instead, we want them to bring it upstairs into the classroom. We want them to have their equipment safe and available for them to use, okay? So that's why, you know, that's a change we're trying to do, and that would be an example of respect for others' property, okay? But more importantly, as a leader, you have to make sure that the cadets respect each other's property as well. Okay, so if you go in there and you see that the cadets are throwing each other's pens and papers around, then you'd be in there as well sorting it out, okay? So respect for one's property is kind of critical because whatever you have, you know, if I were to go and just say Fletcher Poirier's, you know, Traveler Mug away, how would you feel about that, right? Throw it in the garbage, right? You wouldn't be too happy with that, okay? So respect for one's property. If it's somebody else's property, they have some sort of value to it, sentimental value, and you want to keep that in the back of your mind, okay? Always think about that. And personal dignity. This is one that sometimes is overlooked, okay? So the way you behave in front of your cadets, personal dignity. We're going to go into a little bit more as one of the qualities of leadership as well. But what does that sort of mean to you, Sergeant Bukowski, having personal dignity?
Make sure that they show respect.
Yeah, so sort of like more self-respect, right? So you as a person have the integrity to kind of look after yourself, respect the way you're dressing, respect the way you're acting, and that gives you the sense of integrity as well, okay? So as defined in the local handbooks and in other sources as well, those are three main components of integrity, okay? So just overall well-rounded character trait, right? So having those three components. Any questions about those? Good. So the next character trait is professional competence. Professional competence is essentially the fact that you must know how to do your job, okay? And let's say you're instructed to teach a class. If you are not competent in your lesson that you're supposed to teach, then you have to make sure that you take measures to become competent, okay? You don't want to be a leader or someone standing in front of a group of people who doesn't seem competent. If you do not have an understanding of your job, of your role, then you cannot instruct your cadets or your subordinates, okay? So professional competence is one of the main is a very important factor when having self-confidence as well. Okay, if you're competent and you feel that you are competent and prepared, you will also become a better leader. Okay, you will be more confident in what you do, and you'll be able to instruct your cadets better and just give them